Welcome, Pastor Allison.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're here. You are my friend and also the pastor of Journey in Faith Lutheran Church in Racine. Is it called Journey in Faith Lutheran Church or is it Journey in Faith Church?
Journey in Faith Church.
Cool. And I invited you because I know that creation is part of your life in lots and lots of ways. And the first one of those has to do with animals and pets and some parts of your life that you're pretty intentional about. So tell us, what's that about?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me, by the way. If you ask my congregation, probably one of the things I talk most about is my dog, Sage, and I would show you her, but she's hiding from the world right now because she's scared, as you know. So Sage is pretty much my entire world. And when I think about creation and I think about God and God in the world, one of the ways I often describe God, and like one of the big all-encompassing words for God, is that God is faithful. We read scripture and we see that God is faithful throughout time over and over, like no matter how many times we chase the little g gods, right? We have all these other idols. God is faithful when we do that. When we break our end of the covenant, when we mess up, God is still faithful and loyal to us. And this faithfulness that God exhibits is just, it's unwavering and it's unconditional. And so when I think about how creation reflects the faithfulness of God, I think of dogs, because dogs display this unconditional faithfulness and love that's almost absurd and ridiculous that they shouldn't, because sometimes we're terrible to them, and just like we're terrible to God sometimes. Dogs are really good to humans, even when humans are really not great to them, right? So dogs, they're loyal and they love us when we're ignoring them, or when we're in a bad mood, or when we are really terrible and when we hurt them, right? Dogs are stupidly loyal and faithful to their person. And maybe people are thinking, yeah, sure, because we feed them, we usually give them some place to sleep where they're not like freezing in the cold. But our dogs are not just loyal to us because we take care of them, right? They're not just loyal to us because we provide those basic needs for them. There's something about the significance of the relationship between their dogs and their humans that goes beyond just this basic survival needs and those needs getting met. And there's a relationship, that there's a real bond that forms. And so author and researcher Jeffrey Mason, who is quoted in this book, The Grace of Dogs by Andrew Root, and can I show you the book?
Please.
So people go maybe buy it. This is a great book, and it's an easy read, and it's adorable. Look at, this is Kirby.
Kirby's very cute.
It's so cute. But so Andrew Root, he quotes this researcher, and the researcher says this. He says, love on the part of the dog does not seem conditioned merely by what we provide the dog, nor simply a recognition that we are a source of food. A dog does not love a robot that gives it food, but it is capable of loving people who never feed it. And to me, that really reflects that faithfulness rooted in relationship. And I feel that really reflects the way we are with God and the way God is with us. That God's unconditional love and faithfulness to us is rooted in God's relationship with us and us being claimed by God simply because that's what God had decided. And so there's this unbreakable bond, this covenant, if you will, between the two parties, right? And so it's the love and loyalty that's displayed in my dog Sage specifically, but in all dogs because they're the best. But that allows me to experience God at least each day in my life. And so her deep, crazy commitment, right? Her snuggles and her excitement when I come home, and her annoying pawing if I'm not paying attention to her or looking at my phone. No joke, she'll start pawing my hand away from my phone. All of that reveal God's love to me in my life. And in a way that sort of has played into the food that I eat now. And so a couple years ago, I became a vegan, which is no animal products at all. So like no dairy, no cheese, no baked goods, right? And no meat, obviously, and no fish, because fish is meat. I know there's controversy around that, but fish is meat. And so mostly being vegan was more of a protest to the industry and just for the overall health benefits. But kind of the further into the rabbit hole that I got with that, the more it transformed the way that I view animals in general. And I'm actually now a vegetarian because I loved baked goods. But and being vegan was just really hard to live in the world as a vegan, unless you're cooking every day, all day, and I don't have time for that. But so it just transformed the way that I really value animals, and just the created world beyond being human. And so I really, really see God's presence within the world around me, and especially in the way animals kind of go about their own vocations in the way that they live and move around us.
That's really cool. I often ask people to think of adjectives that they would ascribe to God. So maybe they'll say, God is loving, God is kind. For you, God is faithful. And then to think about where they experience that in the world as a place that God is present to them. And it's cool that that's through your dog. You know, sometimes people might be like, oh, it's just a dog, Pastor Allison. But like Sage is really revealing some stuff about God to you.
Yeah.
I saw you get visibly upset at it's just a dog.
And I almost downplayed that to my congregation the other day because we were talking something about children, and they were like, no, she's your child, so she's not just a dog. She's not, right? She is my child, but also she teaches me so much about God and about how to be a better human, which is cool.
So there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. So you talked about this animal part and specifically about Sage and dogs revealing God's faithfulness. But the other thing I know you care about is being outside. So we spend a lot of time going on walks. I know hiking is something you enjoy. You've been to a lot of national parks. Like, what is it about hiking or just about nature that intersects with your life as a Christian?
That's a great question. So I clearly experience God most through creation, animals, being outside. And this has been something that has been with me my whole life. So as a little kid, I love winter and I love the snow, and most people hate it, but it's just so the fresh air or the cold air is really, really refreshing to me. And it's rejuvenating, and it makes me feel like transformed, like new life is kind of being born within me, or like I'm breathing in new life. And this was true for me as a little kid. And so when there would be big snowbanks, I would just sit in the snow as a little kid. just sit, like I would make like a little chair and kind of like plop, because you're just little, you can just kind of set yourself in there. And I would do that in the winter and just pop myself in the snow, and be still. And you know this, that I don't sit still very well, like at all. And so it's just one of those moments where I feel really at peace, and I feel like more of my whole self, like all the restlessness kind of leaves me for just a moment, and I can kind of just be in the presence and like breathe in that air and feel rejuvenated. And so I would just sit in the snow as a kid. And that sort of that love and that presence and that calmness and that peace that nature brought me is something that carries with me now. And so I still love to be outside, and I still love the snow, but that transformed now into a love for hiking and traveling and seeing different parts of nature. And specifically right now, it's trying to hike parts of the Ice Age Trail. Because being outside, it draws me out of myself. It draws me out of that restlessness and allows me to experience that peace and to, again, see kind of the created world living out its own vocation, sort of undisturbed by humanity. And that makes you think about this part of Romans in chapter 8, where Paul's talking about how creation is groaning. It's groaning in labor pains. And he's talking about like the future glory and how we as humans, the Spirit is interceding for us. This is a Pentecost text. And so the Spirit's interceding for us and kind of like bringing us to the future glory. But Paul's also talking about creation, groaning in labor pains, groaning for that restoration as well, because salvation and redemption are not just for humanity. It's cosmic. It's for the created world, because we we impact the world around us, and we can hurt the created world and cause it to be broken as well because of our own brokenness and our own sin in the way that permeates everything else. And so being out in nature kind of gives me that that the peace of God, but also just reminds me that salvation is cosmic. It's for the created world too, and it helps me kind of sit in that place, that thinking about what a restored and whole world would be like. And so it's, yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
I don't remember. I think we're good.
Cool. Well, thanks for talking to me about dogs and hiking and the creation being redeemed as well. I also like all the little Lutheran things that you said. So you talked about the vocation of things that are not human. That's hard for us to remember sometimes. Maybe we could notice that more fully. Maybe people watching this can think about that the next time they're on a walk, the vocation that's happening in other parts of creation around them. And then also that part of being drawn out of ourselves. Luther called that being curvatus in se, right? Like curved in on oneself, and somehow being confronted by something outside of you, whether it's your dog or a pile of snow, can move us to open and be out. Right. And I think that's pretty cool. So thanks for talking to me, Pastor Allison. Happy Lent.
Thank you for having me, Pastor Delaney. Happy Lent.